Today we're going to do the Squirmy Worm, and this is a version that I've been tying for probably 15, 16 years now. Used to guide up at the Swift River on Western Mass for a little bit, and if anybody's not familiar with that river, it's a gin clear river, tailwater, probably runs about 50 to 100 CFS most of the time, so not a fast river at all, about knee to waist deep in most places, and really just a kind of a man-made gravel bottom. So you're sight fishing to every single fish you see up there. And when I designed this with my guiding partner, Patrick Barone, we have probably hundreds of hours of putting these worms in front of fish, different hooks, beads, lead setups, different depths, different lengths of the worm, you name it. We have hundreds of hours in front of the fish, just observing them, seeing how they were going to eat it, if they weren't going to eat it, what they liked about the fly, what made the fly easier to fish for us. And this is kind of the final version we stumbled upon. So for the hooks, we're going to use these clink hammer hooks, either a Daiichi 1167 size 8 or a Partridge clink hammer size 8. You might think that size 8's a big hook. Well, it is kind of a big hook, but for this fly, it's really not too big. The only part of the hook that's going to be exposed that the fish is actually going to be able to see is the hook point. So it really doesn't matter if you have a size 8 or a size 20. They're pretty much going to see just that little tiny bit of steel sticking out. The reason we went with the hook that size is this size hook is roughly a third of the size of the worm. If you lay the worm on top, you'll see you kind of have a third in front, then you have the third that's covered by the hook, and then you'll have a third in back. And what that eliminates is if you use a really small hook with these worms, and especially if you use a bead or a lot of weight on it, it's going to go through the water like this, just a pair of parallel lines. You might not notice it if you don't have, like a gin clear fishery like we had to fish it so many times, but most of the time with a small hook and a lot of weight concentrated, it's just going through the water like this, and the fish won't even look at it. With this setup, you're almost guaranteed to have it, spread out and looks like a worm. Now, the other reason we use this is because you can spread the weight out on the hook. We're going to have the weight going across the whole entire hook, which is going to make it sink much more uniformly than if you were to just have, a bead in one spot where it's just kind of nosedive straight down. If you watch a worm fall out of a tree, whether it's an inchworm, a caterpillar, or whatever, nothing just nosedives straight to the bottom of the river. They kind of fall in, get kind of washed up in the current, tumble around a bit, and that's kind of what we were looking to mimic. The other thing about these hooks is, being that we fish that Swift a lot and we get to watch the fish eat the flies a lot, they could eat a fly and spit it out before you'd even know it. If you're fishing an indicator, your indicator wouldn't even move. With smaller hooks, they seem to be able to do that a lot more easily than they can with this. For some reason, when they eat this and try to spit it out, it usually gets stuck on the way out. So all those reasons being, we kind of settled with this hook. And for the worm material, it's pretty much always been Spirit River worm material. There's some other stuff out there. Squirmito's one. There's a new Trina's worm material. And there's been like probably 4 or 5 other worm material that looks almost exactly like this, but it doesn't behave like it. If you look at the Spirit River stuff, it's just limp. It no memory in it whatsoever. It's really, really stretchy, and it's kind of the only one that's like that out of all those materials. And believe me, we tried everything, and for whatever reason, Spirit River was always the most successful catching fish up there. And I mean, these fish see thousands of flies on a weekend. Another thing with that river, we found that the glow color works the best up there, whether it's this green or this blue. I'm not really sure if it's because there's a lot of inchworms up there, which there are a ton of inchworms. There's not a lot of natural insect activity up there. You have some really small midges. But I think a lot of the fish's diet is based on aquatic worms, whether it's from the levels fluctuating and, saturating the bank and having some worms come out and them eat it. It's kind of a skinny river, so guys are always walking up and down the river, whether they're dislodging worms when they walk with their feet, when they kick up the dust clouds. For whatever reason, this color works the best. There's also a bright blue and green caterpillar that's in the trees up there that comes out a lot when it's raining, and this looks almost exactly like it. once you have it tied up. I'll throw a video of that in this video so you can see the bug that I'm referencing there. But yeah, let's get to it, and I'll show you how we tie these up. All right, so we're gonna start with some 020 wire, whether it's lead free or lead. That's your choice. A lot of guys waste lead wire. I'm not really sure why. It's pretty easy to get this on a hook without wasting any. Just hold the spool in your hand, pull out just a tiny bit to get it started, bend it around. This is gonna take 22 wraps for this size hook. When you get to the end, break it off with your fingernail. Squish the back up and just mat it down, and then you didn't waste any wire at all. We're also going to use a size 3/0 uni thread. You might think that's a big thread. It is a big thread, but we're doing that for a couple of reasons. We're going to cover this whole lead wire in thread. We also don't want to cut through the worm material with the thread, so being a thicker diameter, it's harder to do it with the 3/0. It also stretches a little bit, this material, and it also has some texture to it. I don't really use uni thread for a lot of things, but it's perfect for this application. So we're going to start in the front, and you're going to hold your tag in your hand, just like this. What you're going to do is you're going to pull it all the way down behind the wire and pull that wire up towards the front. And then you're just going to wrap around the back. And by doing that, you left a little piece on the bottom. And what that's going to do is going to prevent your thread from getting caught within the wire, and it also is going to keep this lead wire scrunched together, so it's not going to separate on you. And then we're just going to start covering up the lead wire with the thread. Once you get to the back, you can cut this off. We're really just going to make sure that we get all this wire covered up. And what this is doing is giving you a nice solid base to tie the worm on top of. A lot of patterns. Guys have put dubbing on the thread. They put beads on here. They've tried to glue the worm down to the hook. And really, the only reason that the worm isn't tying correctly to the hook is just the hook is actually too skinny to get the worm on there correctly. So once you bulk it up like that, it's going to be easy to get the worm material on there. I'm going to take one piece of that Spirit River worm material. I'm just going to cut it in half so you get 2 out of each piece. And then we're just going to hold it up. I'm going to pinch it right in the middle of the worm. And the way we tie this on is you let it hang towards you a little bit. And it's one big open easy wrap. I didn't pull tight here. Now this is just an easy open wrap. Then you're going to do 3 or 4, and then you can cinch down. Then again, just going to pull it towards you. Let the thread just carry it right over the top. Easy wrap. Then you can cinch down about your 2nd or 3rd in. We look for about 3 to 4 humps on here. I usually get 3 in. It's usually where I like it. Once you get to your front hump, just build the front up a little bit. This is the one you want to make sure is going directly over the hook eye. If it's not, you can let up a little bit on your tension till it is. Once you have it perfectly resting over the hook eye, you're just going to do some wraps in front. I like this little tiny Tiemco whip finisher. It's really nice. You can really get in a lot of these flies really close up to the front. I do about a 3-turn whip finish, and then I'll put another one in there because there's no glue on this fly. Any kind of super glue is going to melt this material. And for some reason, UV, I found, if you can use UV on here, it's not going to hurt the fly at all, but the catch rate seems to go down with it on there. So just a bare hook and thread, and there's your worm. Kill that. All right, so again, that's that's the squirmy worm. Like I said, if you're using a short hook and this goes in the water, you have a good chance of getting a parallel line kind of drift like this going down the water, and the fish don't they don't like that at all. With this, the kind of the smallest you can possibly have is going to be like this, and it's much more of a worm shape. So again, that's why we use this size hook. And the fish are going to eat it, and they're not going to be able to spit it out. It seems to get stuck on the way out, this circular kind of shape. You'll see this fly is very, very limp. Fish can nip at the tail, and they're not gonna rip it off unless they saw right through it, which doesn't happen too often. But this should last you 3 or 4 fish, each one of these worms, and it's a very successful pattern up there. And then let's give you a couple tips on how I usually like to fish these things. So if you're up at the Swift and you have your worms, what I like to do with these is I like to make sure I start my drift at least 30 feet in front of the fish. You don't want to have this thing drop in the water right in the fish's head and expect them to come up and eat it. You want this thing to drop in the water, have some time to get to depth. If you're running it on an indicator, great. If not, then it gives you some time to get your tight line in check where you have it at the depth you want, and then you can kind of just guide it right to the fish. You never want the thing to just drop in the water and think the fish is just going to eat it on the fall on, because it usually doesn't happen that way. Just keep an eye on what the fish are doing. If the fish swims up to the fly and swims away, that's a fish you can usually get to eat at the Swift. Something in your presentation wasn't right, whether you had some drag on the fly or you just didn't like something about that presentation. So I would just take it out and then go right back at him with the same fly. Do that a few times. If he keeps swimming up to it and looking at it, you have his interest. If this is coming at the fish like this, and all of a sudden you see the fish just kind of move off to the side, from what I found, that means that your tippet's too thick. You really want to get down to your tippet. The fish isn't moving away from your fly. He's moving away from your tippet. They've gotten used to seeing the tippet come down, and they've kind of learned that that's bad, and they usually get caught. Sometimes you'll see fish actually, the fly will be going at them, and you'll see them start moving their mouth fast. That's almost like an allergic reaction. Like if you have a dog and you give them antibiotics and they don't like it, you'll go to give it to them again, and they kind of make that kind of reaction. That's the reaction that I think they've gotten from, not necessarily from being caught by a fly, but they're associating that with your leader and the tippet you have. What we found is floating these flies down with 11X tippet. I think High Sense used to make it. I don't know if you can get it anymore, but we did float a lot of these flies with 10 and 11X just to see what would happen. And you never get that fish swimming off to the side of the fly. They're either going to swim right up to it, or they're just not going to be bothered at all. And if you drift this by a fish and he doesn't even move out of his line, doesn't even look at it, I would just move on to a different fish. I mean, there's thousands of fish up there you can fish to. If you don't have one that's interested, it's really hard to make the fish want to eat when they're not interested in eating. You'll know the ones that want to eat. They'll move towards the fly, they'll back up, they'll look at it. Sometimes they move back up, swim 20 feet away, and then come back at it to nail it again. Those are the fish you're going to be able to catch. I wouldn't waste my time with the fish that aren't moving at all. Certain times of the day they want to eat, certain times they don't. They could be spooked. They could have gotten caught earlier. They could still be spooked from the day before. Could have somebody just walk right over them. It takes them a little bit of time to calm down. So, if you see a fish swim up to your fly and then back up and swim back up to it again, and you can't catch them, give them 20 minutes. Go downstream a little bit, fish for some other fish, and then you can come back and check him out. It's really an interesting place up there, the Swift River, to be able to, it's not the most natural kind of fishery, but it does give you a way to observe fish that you don't really have anywhere else. I don't know of too many other places where you can actually, put your fly in the water, see your fly drifting in the water towards the fish, and then get the fish's reaction to it. That's a lot of, the fish will give you a good idea of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, no matter which fly you have. You can really fine tune your nymphing skills in that river. I know the fish can be hard to catch sometimes, but a lot of times they'll eat junk flies like this. They'll eat worms, they'll eat eggs. You don't have to fish size 30 midges all the time up there. We've caught plenty of fish on these. I have plenty of pictures of, we used to, we would have clients, and they would, you'd have fish in the kind of middle water column, fish on the bottom water column. So we'd set them up with an indicator, even two of the same fly, one high and one low, and I have pictures of people catching 2 fish at a time up there. It's mostly about getting that drift way in front of the fish so they don't see your fly coming down, they don't see the splash, they don't see your rod tip from far away, but they see this thing coming 20-30 feet at them, and it looks natural coming in the water at them. I would try to get your drift as long as you possibly can there, and and really guide it to them rather than just plop it in and right by, plop it in right by. It's the water isn't fast enough and there isn't enough turbulence and rocks and things for, to obstruct their view, where they're just going to come out and react to it and bite it as they would in a lot of other rivers. It's really kind of a planned game up there with these type of flies. So tie these up, give it a shot. Again, if you're at the Swift, I suggest this glow color. Orange works in the fall up there really well. Below the pipe, you can fish pink. If you're going to the Deerfield or the Hoosick or any of the other rivers out in Western Mass, I would say just stick with the pink. It seems to work the best, out there. Even up in Maine, a lot of the fish, they love the pink worms. But for whatever reason, the Y pool down to the pipe in the Swift, they love this green color. So tie some up and give them a shot.